Welcome to another How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. This is How to Succeed at Public Speaking. My guest this week is Brenden Kumarasamy. You can find him at Master Talk on YouTube or rockstarcommunicator.com. The following podcast is brought to you by Sandler Systems, Inc. and protected by U.S. copyright laws. Sandler is the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts or wherever you're listening right now. Might be a good place to start. All right, we're going to talk to Brenden Kumarasamy about how to succeed at public speaking. Brenden, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a little bit about public speaking and how you got into it. What are we talking about today?
Absolutely, Mike. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be on your show. So thanks so much for having me. And in terms of where I got started, it all began when I was in college and university, Mike. I went to business school and I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing basketball or rugby or soccer, I wasn't one of those guys. I did presentations competitively, and that's why I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, Mike, I started coaching a lot of the students in those programs on how to communicate ideas. And that's how I learned the art of coaching. So a few years after that, I had the idea for the YouTube channel Master Talk because I felt that everything that I was sharing with the students wasn't really available for free on the internet for someone who couldn't afford someone like me as a communication coach. So I started making videos while I was working a great corporate job. And then a few years later, the YouTube channel just turned into something I never could have imagined in the coaching practice as well.
That's so cool. Now, let's talk about public speaking itself. You and I have had a ton of experience and took a lot of practice. I feel like you might be like me as well, that people see me now and they go, "Oh, you're such a natural up there." And I go, "Well, you didn't see me when I started 25 years ago. It was a freaking disaster." So, what do you feel like are some common misconceptions or challenges around public speaking?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one, Mike, and I completely agree with what you just said. People don't see the hard work behind the success that you have, is really in the context of motivation. So a lot of people think the biggest challenge around communication is fear, Mike. And the reason I actually think motivation is bigger is simply because if we're motivated enough, we'll crush the fear. If we really want to make it happen, the fear will not necessarily go away, but it'll get smushed like a bug. So what's the more important question? The more important question is, why aren't we motivated to speak? And the reason is because a lot of communication, Mike, is tied with negative labeling. Whenever you think of communication, you think fear, stress. Oh my God, I have to do this. There's like a sigh. And we primarily see it as a chore, kind of like doing the dishes. And nobody wants to get better at that. So the question I always start every coaching session, every video, every conversation is more empowering, which is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? A lot of us dream about the expensive vacations we want to go on, the expensive things we want to buy. When was the last time we dreamed about our communication? And the answer is never. So start now.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I'm imagining there are a bunch of other great attitudes you want to have when you're going up to speak, and I guess you can tell me, but I feel like this is whether it's a sales presentation, whether you're speaking in front of the company or a sales meeting, or you're going on stage in front of thousands of people, there are some things in common that we want to keep in mind and beliefs that we want to have when we walk on stage. What comes to mind when I say that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you talked about, you touched upon so well, is the idea of sales presentations, right? How can we intertwine sales with communication? And the way that I see this, Mike, is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So one of them is eye contact, one of them is smiling, one of them is body language, and it can get really confusing, especially if you're in sales and you're getting started at thinking about communication and why you need to master it. Obviously, we know the reason why. It's because the economics are very different between a top 1% salesman and a top 10% salesperson. It's the economics are massive. So obviously, when you spend more time communicating, you'll make more money. But the better question now becomes, what are the 3 easiest balls that people can get started with? And let's start with ball number 1, which is, it has nothing to do with giving a keynote or speaking in front of a group. And I'm shocked at how little salespeople salespeople do this because obviously I've bought a lot of programs and I don't see any of their salespeople sending me this. So it drives me crazy. Video messages. I don't care what you're selling. You could sell high-end B2B sales trainings. You could be selling low-end, low-ticket. You could be at a restaurant for all I care. I am shocked, Mike, at the number of people who do not send video messages to their existing clients, not even prospects. How I make most of my money, and it's never on a podcast. I just like meeting people. That's why I like doing these things. For me, the biggest thing is sending video messages to my existing clients, and it's never pitching them on anything. We have a database where we send them a video message when it's their birthday or when it's their special day for them or just in general, just to appreciate them. And 10% of those video messages always, the reply is, "Oh, Brenden, it's so great to hear from you. You know, there's this vice president I forgot to introduce you to, but you sent me this video message." And I make like 10 grand in a day. So yes, leverage that if there's anything you get out of this episode.
Oh, video selling and stuff is huge. We've definitely been on that one since the pandemic for sure. But you're right. It should have been even before that. I think just the amount of quality of communication is better when you're showing your body language, your face, your smile, and your tonality all on that. It's much better than a cold email that doesn't have any of that. That's huge. What else? You mentioned a couple of other balls that we might want to start with.
Absolutely. So the first one is definitely the video message. And the point that I'll add as a PSA, I'm sure a lot of people have talked about it. You probably talk about this every episode. But the punchline that I want to drive with that is nobody does it. So for everyone listening to this, the question is not, do I know this? That's the wrong question. The question is rather, am I implementing this? And what you'll find is people aren't doing question number 2, which brings me to ball number 2, speaking of twos, question drills. We get asked questions all the time in our life, Mike. When prospects ask us questions about our products and services, when we're on a strategy call, when we're on a podcast and we're talking about who we are and why we started what we do, whether we're with our families, really everything, we're always going to ask questions. But most of us are reactive to those questions, Mike. We're not proactive. I remember a few years ago when I started podcasting as a guest, I sucked. Like I was terrible because I was just getting started. It was probably 3 years ago. Even if I'd been coaching for 7, I hadn't really guested on a show before. And somebody caught me off guard with a question. He said, "Where does the fear of communication come from?" And I look at the guy and I go, "I don't know, man. San Diego, Los Angeles, you tell me." Right? So I was lost and I got caught off guard and I never made that mistake again. So every day, and it's very simple for salespeople listening to this, 5 minutes a day is all I ask. Write down and reflect the answer to one question you think a prospect is going to ask you about your business. 5 minutes a day keeps the doctor away, as I always like to say. So if you do that every day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your product or service. You'll be bulletproof with only 5 minutes of practice a day. So that's number 2.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that one. And Sandler, we are definitely all about the questions. And I would say you could double down, maybe make it 10 minutes and do, a question a day that you want to ask your prospect as well to uncover more information. And then you're going to be set. You're going to be prepped for every call you go on for the rest of your career, which is great. All right. Tip number 3.
Absolutely. So I would say tip number 3 is, I just forgot it. What is it? Oh, no, I got it. It's the random word exercise. I don't know what happened there. So the random word exercise is really simple. You pick a random word like cup, like iPhone, like ocean, and you create random presentations out of thin air. So now the next question becomes, Mike, why is this exercise relevant? The reason it's relevant is simple. If you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. And this is why I force a lot of people I work with to do the random word exercise 100 times in 2 weeks, which actually doesn't take that long because the random word exercise takes 60 seconds to do once. You like go orange. Orange is a fruit, and you kind of just make a presentation. But what's great about this as well is it helps you think on your feet a lot faster. And it's also easy to do in your current surroundings. What I have a lot of parents do is to do this with their kids if they have any, or people around them. So whenever they're picking them up from school, instead of turning on music, they just do that with themselves. And the people are listening to this and going, "I don't have time." I always respond with, "Well, do you shower?" And they go, "Yeah." "Well, you got 10 minutes there, so do the random word exercise for 10 minutes there."
I love it. I think that's a great one for like sales meetings or anytime you're practicing and role playing with other people in your company. Like you said, you can do it by yourself, or we've seen a couple of things like with Sandler trainers. Sometimes for our presentations, we'll kind of like print out all the slides and then shuffle them up and just start. And you got to start your presentation from whatever slide you pick up out of the deck, and that's like PowerPoint karaoke. And fun fact, both Brenden and I were guests on the Greatest Song Sung Poorly podcast.
Oh, you were?
The karaoke podcast. Yeah. So we love a good karaoke, but presentation karaoke is definitely a great way to pick up those skills and get good at presenting. So if you have like a lot of product information about your product or service, and you want to start testing yourself or your team on stuff like that, that's a great way to do it. Okay, now I can't let you get out of here without giving us some tips. So it's time to do the technique section, hacks, tips, any techniques or strategies that make a really good talker. Let's specifically talk about the delivery, because I know you have a bunch of good stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So let's start with the first point, which you mentioned, PowerPoint karaoke. Since you mentioned it, let me add more nuance to it. So what you suggest is excellent, right? Take the product or service, shuffle up the slides. But this is what I call level 1 PowerPoint karaoke. That's like the easiest way to do this. The harder version is put pictures of giraffes in it, like things that have nothing to do with the product or service. And people ask you questions about something that has nothing to do with the product or service. That's what I call like a level 10 PowerPoint carry. That's more level 5. And then level 10 is none of the slides make any sense, and your audience heckles you as if they're a very frustrated client. And they're going, why aren't the giraffes delivered at the zoo? Like they're asking you random questions, and you have to answer them really professionally. So there's different levels to that game. But if you could do like level 10, I mean, any sales presentation will be a joke. Speaking of sales, though, going back on track here, there's a lot of techniques we can talk about, but I would say the most important one that really helps a lot of sales guys and gals optimize their presentation prep is a technique I teach called puzzle. So communication is like a jigsaw puzzle, Mike. You know those toy puzzles you used to do as kids? You put them together. So if I asked you, Mike, since you're a karaoke guy, you probably the answer to this question too, is when you work on a puzzle, it's easy, don't worry. When you work on a puzzle, which pieces do you start with first and why?
Yeah, start with the corners and then down the edges. Yeah.
Absolutely. And why is that?
They're easiest to find. And so you can organize it. Yeah.
Perfect. That's literally the right answer. You got it. But here's the problem, Mike. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because most of us in communication, especially when we're prepping sales or orals presentations in an RFP process, we do the opposite. We shove a bunch of content, we get to the presentation, we ramble throughout the whole sales pitch, and the last slide sounds something like this. Yeah, so I guess we're done. And
any questions? Yeah.
It's like crazy. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, are we looking to close the sale or just give a presentation for fun here? So instead, what I recommend, and it doesn't apply for sales, but I think in sales in particular, it's very effective, is practice like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edges first. So if you only got 2 hours to practice your pitch, instead of just spending 2 hours just doing the whole thing over and over and over again, which is dumb because you'll only be able to do it like 4 times essentially. Instead, what I recommend is do the intro 50 times. Start with the edges first. Just the intro. Do nothing else. 90 seconds, 50 times. It'll take you an hour. Your intro will be perfect. Same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. Get really clear about the ending. And in sales, that might look like a clear set of next steps. How do we move forward in the sales process? Or in other situations, which is more what I teach, is going to be more around how do you inspire them to take action on your ideas? And then tackle the middle. And that's something I feel a lot of people don't do.
Yeah, I think specifically that helps me a lot, even when I'm given keynote presentations and stuff. If you have to talk for an hour, you want to make sure you have those milestones in the middle. Right? You want to nail the opening because that's your first impression. You want to nail the close because that's the last impression and how people are going to remember you. And then in the middle, whatever your main points are, however many you have, 3, 5, whatever, if you can hit those benchmarks and you know where you're going, the rest of it's going to be fine. If you run out of stuff to say or you get lost, you just go to the next benchmark and you can get right on track. I think that's great advice. What about anything else technically? I'll give you one more shot at this. I know people always worry about ums and ahs or personal presence and what do we do with our hands kind of thing. You don't have to get that specific, but I think for me, it's really about, like you said, not worrying about all of those 18 different balls in the air and really just being yourself. And if you can find a way to be fully present, a lot of that stuff takes care of itself. But any tips there for us?
Absolutely, Mike. Happy to go deeper on this. So the reason I don't go deeper on this is not because I don't know the answer. For those who are listening, it's because I don't want to confuse people. Let me explain what I mean with the 18 ball analogy, because you actually context that perfectly in the sense that cadence is ball number 7. Vocal tone variety is ball number 8. Body language is ball number 10. Storytelling, I would argue, is ball number 13, which I feel is not taught in the right sequence. And the reason is because, people say stories are important, whereas my rebuttal is, okay, well, if you're saying a bunch of filler words, you're not going to tell great stories. Yeah, once upon a time, and like, it's just not going to work. But having said that, here's what I'll say. Let's talk about filler words in particular, because that's something people can implement. How do you get rid of filler words? The first piece to filler words is understanding why we say them in the first place. The reason we say them in the first place, Mike, is because we want to buy time. So let's say you ask me a question, I'll go, so Mike, so I'll use filler words to buy time in the presentation. That's why we say them. So now the question becomes, what do the world's best communicators do? Because they're not smarter than us. They have to buy time. It's just the difference is that they pause to buy time. And that's the secret that the best communicators don't tell us, is that they can pause forever without ever making it sound awkward at all. But obviously, we don't have forever, so you had to take my word for it. But the point I want to drive is the way you practice this is challenging, but it's easy. It's easy to understand, not simple to do. I call it the endless gaze. So all you have to do, Mike, is stare into the eyes of somebody that you love for 3 minutes. And this is a very difficult exercise. How do you stare into people's eyes for 3 minutes? And what I always like to say, and I force a lot of people when I meet them in person to do this, it's pretty wild, because when you do that, you can easily pause for 3 seconds when you're in a presentation. So that's one. Obviously, I'm happy to go into the other details like cadence, the best speakers on the planet speak quickly and slowly and all that stuff.
Oh, no, I think that's great. And it's a perfect segue to give you a plug. If you want more details on any of that, go to Master Talk on YouTube. Brenden does like a video a week for the last 3 years, a ton of great tips that he'll dive into a whole bunch of those. And you can go to rockstarcommunicator.com to get in touch with him if you need some personal coaching and want to get extra help there as well. So Brenden Kumarasamy, I want to learn more about you now. How do you define success at this point in your career? You've won award speaking. You got a successful business. What does success look like for you now?
Absolutely, Mike. I'm super grateful that I've been able to reach this level very early in my career, and it's something I'm thankful for every day. I would say for me, what's the bigger mission? When I started Mass Talk, it was never about building a business. The business was an accident. The reason I did it, and the reason it's not because I'm philanthropic. It's because I had a great job at IBM. They were paying me well. So I was like, oh, I need to make this work. It was just a hobby. But I think what I landed on over the years is Mass Talk is so much more than just a coaching business. It's how do we create free resources? That's why I still make the videos today that the next Elon Musk can get access to. Because I think what drove me nuts was when Elon was 15 years old in South Africa, nobody cared about him. Nobody sat him down and said, hey, Elon, you're going to do big things with your life. How about we work on your communication for a few hours? Because that'll help you. He still made it. He still became successful. But boy, his life would have been way easier if he just didn't and ah and looked weird all the time whenever he spoke. But now the next piece for my mission that I don't think a lot of coaches in my industry think too much about is what about the next Elon Musk? Who's 15 years old right now? We're talking right now. We don't know who it is. It might be a girl in Johannesburg. Like, who knows? What are we doing for her? And I realized I was the only communication coach on earth who was actually thinking that, because I can't make money off of that person. It was more about how do I be the next Dale Carnegie? How do I share those resources long after I'm gone? And that's the big ethos of the big North Star that guides my life, essentially.
Oh, that's so awesome. I haven't heard it put that way. I really like that. That's great. What was the biggest lesson learned or hurdle in your career that you had to get over in order to be successful?
Yeah, I would say the big one, there's a lot of them, to be honest, but I would say the most important one that encompasses all of that is understanding that the relationship that successful people have with failure is a very different relationship than the one that unsuccessful people have with failure. So what do I mean by this? Let's take sales. I mean, sales is probably the best example to demonstrate this. Let's say you talk to 10 prospects. It doesn't really matter what you sell. Okay, let's say it's a coaching package. Keep it simple. And out of those 10 people, one of them buys. Okay. Let's say it's a few $1,000. I don't know, 3 grand. Let's put 3 grand as a placeholder there. So the unsuccessful person will go, oh my God, I had to like talk to 10 people to make a sale. I don't think I could do this. I have to talk to like another 10 people and hopefully I close one person. Whereas a successful person just looks at it from as a game. They go, oh, like I had to screw up 9 times to get one sale. Amazing. So if I talk to 1,000 people, I'll make 300 grand this year. Let's do it, right? And they have that same relationship, not just in sales, but with finding a significant other, with having great health, with every area of the getting on a podcast. Okay, 10 other people are going to reject me, but if Mike says yes, I'll be successful. And that's the relationship I want people to take on with failure.
That's the way I like to think about it too. If Mike says yes, you'll be a success. Do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
Absolutely. I got a ton, but I'll give you one that I invented in my basement that rhymes and I think is cool. And the quote is, be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you want to do something special with your life, we need to realize that the people who do crazy things in life and accomplish crazy things are often crazy people. Don't you find it odd, Mike, that a 22-year-old kid, I'm not 22 anymore, but back then, I started a YouTube channel, not on pranks, not on skits, not on comedy, but on executive communication tips. And then the following year, I started coaching all these CEOs who are double my age, get all the success, yet I still live in my mother's basement. Yet I karaoke in 8 different languages. Yet I'm in the 0.5, not the 5, in the 0.5% of all listeners of Spotify of Justin Bieber. How does any of this make any sense at all? And that's the point, Mike. When every decision in your life makes sense to the only person that it should, which is you, you'll win in life.
I love that, man. And that's a great thing to end on. So we're just stop it there. Go find Brenden Kumarasamy at rockstarcommunicator.com or subscribe to the YouTube channel Master Talk. While you're there, check out the Sandler Worldwide YouTube channel. We are blowing that up this year and putting all the podcasts over there as well. So if you need any more resources on Sandler, go to sandler.com. As always, share this episode with somebody that you think needs to hear it. And thank you for listening. Remember, whatever you are, be a good one. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. For more information, go to sandler.com. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe to get notified about future sales and leadership videos from Sandler.
The Sandler Summit returns in 2023. Each new event builds exponentially upon the energy and success of the prior year. The 2022 Sandler Summit event was a huge success for everyone who attended, so don't miss the next one. Buy your tickets to the Sandler Summit at sandler.com/summit.